Growth Pains.
Hey, hi everyone, Nacho here. Welcome to the first episode of Growth Pains. The goal of this podcast, to be honest, is first of all that there seems to be a growing number of people out there that are feeling like they're not good at their work. This is very much the case in tech startups, obviously, which is my world. But yeah, I think it's similar in all kinds of businesses of all kinds of sizes. So my goal here is to show everyone that's struggling that we all struggle, that we all screw up, and that the process is always a bit dirty, it's not that easy, and that you don't have to feel bad about that. Secondly, I do think that we can learn more from struggles than from post-rationalized success stories. So hopefully digging into these pains will also leave you with some valuable learnings that you can put into practice. This is not about failures. I don't want to glorify failures. I don't want to go in that direction, but this is about the struggles along the way. You could end up in a success or a failure. That doesn't really matter, but the only thing that's kind of certain is that there will be some pains along the way, right? So without further ado, I would like to introduce my first guest. I'm not really sure he needs an introduction. He's the founder and former CEO of Moz, the author of one of my favorite books in business, Lost and Founder, and he's now the co-founder and CEO of SparkToro. So it's Mr. Rand Fishkin. How are you, Rand? Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Nacho. Doing okay. Things are...
Yeah. Okay, it's a little bit of what you can go for these days, right? I don't think there's nothing wrong about that. I mean, I guess this podcast comes in an appropriate time as well for what we're all going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we launched a new startup 2 months and 3 days ago.
Yeah.
That has been an exciting journey. This morning, our app is down for the first time ever, and we're not sure if that's because last night I put up a blog post about racial injustice and Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I read it this morning.
Yeah, we might have. We're not sure yet. We're investigating the cause, but we think we might have experienced a DDoS sort of attack on our app.
Oh wow!
So it's it's a heck of a day.
All right, I'm not gonna go into that topic either because I don't want people to start hacking my podcast or Zoom bombing us. But I wanted to kick it off with something that I think I might ask also all of the guests in this podcast. I'm just working with the structure so far, but the first thing would be to talk about one thing or a few things that you think that you're really, really bad at when it comes to your working life. And I have a bunch but I guess you have some too.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so many. I think one of the biggest ones for certain is I really despise and am not good at and don't even really understand the psychology and politics of larger organizations.
Right.
So once my last company, Moz, got above 50, 60 people and teams and sort of tribalism started forming inside the organization, that really brought me a tremendous amount of emotional pain. It was the kind of problem that you could not solve with good ideas and hard work. And that, it tore at me. Right. I think that was one of the things that led, frankly, to the depression that I wrote about in Lost and Founder and to a lot of the unhappiness that I had in the later stages of the company. Right. I think it's almost certainly responsible for why I stepped down as CEO. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Big companies.
One of the main things you mentioned also, right, in the book that I thought was really interesting because I've certainly been in kind of like in a similar position is that as Moz started scaling, project management was a big pain for you. So this is not only the people part, but also like trying to keep everybody in the loop of what everybody's working on. How do you think you're going to deal with that when the time comes for SparkToro to do the same? Or are you trying to keep it lean out towards the end? Yeah. Three people forever kind of thing.
I mean, this is one of the things, Nacho, I think this is one of the keys that many founders, many business owners, executives, even folks inside companies and teams don't realize that they have the option to not just encounter problems and work through them, but basically just avoid them entirely, right? You can just say, hey, we're not good at finance, whatever. I hate dealing with accounting and bookkeeping. You know what? I'm just going to hire an outside accountant to handle all of that forever. And I don't care if it's more expensive. I just don't want to manage it in-house. I don't want to have that on my plate. And I'm going to build a business that only accepts one kind of payment. And I'm going to only do, one price point and whatever, right? Like just to make everything super simple. You can work around these problems. The way to work around the people issue that I have is basically Casey and I don't ever want to build a company of more than 50 people.
Yeah.
So we are going to, whatever sorts of financial sizes, customer serving sizes we can get to, awesome. But in terms of people in the organization, we want to keep it very lean. And so far, it's just the two of us, and we use a lot of contractors.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, right? I mean, from what you were explaining in the book, that's definitely the smartest way to approach this, especially because you're in a different stage of life. You're not getting like VC backing and all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense. I wanted to also add like a little bit of a section here that it might become cool or it might become an horrendous failure, but I'm going to give it a try, which is a little bit of a true or false kind of game here. So I'll give you a few statements. I think it's going to be like 5 or 6. And as we go, you're going to let me know whether they're true or false. You can call it word or bullshit or something cooler, whatever you want to go with.
I love it.
So let me start with the first one. I think I know what you're going to answer, but I might get surprised on this one.
Okay.
With the massive success of Moz, Rand could be chilling in his Seattle penthouse right now, swimming in a pool of gold coins if he wanted to. He's just lost the grind, and that's why he's launching SparkToro.
Oh, that's super false. Incredibly false. Yeah. So just to be clear, I think my total earnings ever out of Moz were about $1 million and all salary, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry. My wife and I we sold some stock to one of the investors and used that money to pay off my grandparents' house in New Jersey, which
cool, man.
Yeah, but we do not have that kind of money. No, I had to raise money for SparkToro because we didn't have the money to start it ourselves.
Yeah, you get that a lot, don't you?
The problem, you know what the problem is, Nacho? The problem is Google. Because if you Google, if you start typing Rand Fishkin, they suggest Rand Fishkin net worth.
Yeah.
And if you search for Rand Fishkin net worth, Google gives you a totally wrong answer, right? That's like way out
man, I should have Googled that one before.
You know what I should do? I should write my own post that's like Rand Fishkin net worth and then just lay it out there.
All right. Let's go with the second one. If you would be happiest building a strong, stable business that's profitable, that makes you wealthy and happy, giving you a great work-life balance at the same time, raising venture capital is a shit idea.
100% true.
Can you elaborate about it? What's your experience on that one?
Yeah, well, so venture, right? Venture investment requires a high multiple of return from a very small number of companies in the portfolio. Right. So the model is essentially, hey, we're going to, we'll raise a $300 million fund. We'll invest in 300-ish startups. We expect 290 of those to fail or flame out or be sold for parts, be unsuccessful, go bankrupt. And we expect 10, maybe 2 or 3 of those 10 to be $1 billion plus IPOs, and 7 or 8 of those 10 to be multi-$100 million exits, and that'll make up for the rest of the portfolio, right? And so then we get our 3 to 5x return on the 300 million by having those 10 companies do it. So when you sign up for venture, the odds are suddenly stacked so far against you surviving a long time, having a successful business, right? A business that has an exit that is financially good for you, your co-founders, your employees and team. Pretty unlikely that your product will keep serving your customers well for a long period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like everybody's going to fail except for kind of the investment class that's put the money in, because they don't care about you failing. Well, they care, right? But they only care 1/300th, right? You're just one of many bets. And their hope is just that a few turn into the big ones. If you're not it, you're not
actually your book has one of the best explanations, I think, on the topic. I when you read it through, you put it kind of in apples and oranges, and it becomes really clear, in a world that it's over, full with buzzwords and things, kind of to like make you not really understand what's going on. Kind of like to just use these crazy terminologies, like insurances and all these kinds of stuff, when you have these terms that are like logarithmic equations to calculate what the insurance is going to cover not, just to drive you crazy. Right.
In VC, right? It's liquidation preference.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think anybody really has a good understanding of the fact that, for example, my wife worked at a company.
Yeah.
She got stock in that company. It was here in Seattle as a startup. They sold for $100 million and maybe 90 million, something like that. And I think they had raised 35 or 36 million, but there was a 2x liquidation preference from the investors. So the first $75 million of the buyout went to the VCs, right? And then everybody else got to split whatever the leftover 12 or 13, which was basically the founders, the bank, because they had debt, right, that they owed. And I think the employees' stock was essentially worthless at the end.
Wow.
Oops.
All right, man. Next one. Let's see. This one, I think it's, I hope you answer what I think you're going to answer, but let me see. It's a little bit from your book, but maybe you don't remember anymore. So most marketers strive to move people down their funnel as quickly as possible, from reading a piece of content to buying. The shorter, the better. But sometimes increasing that time can pay off in the long term. True or false?
Totally true. Yeah, absolutely true. The reason is basically that I've seen this at Moz, and I've seen it at plenty of other SaaS and subscription businesses that I've helped and been parts of, which is that folks who are more in your world, right, who know you, like you, trust you more, they tend to be better long-term customers. And one of the best ways to do that is to, before someone buys, build up a rapport with them, right? Build up your brand, make them a fan. And then when they do convert, they're much more likely to be a subscriber or a contributor, a buyer, a repeat buyer again and again, as opposed to the sort of, I need this thing, I come to your homepage, I convert, you did a great job converting me, now I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't know who you are, I don't care.
All right. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really interesting. It's a really tough internal sell, I guess, especially for people that are starting out, right? I mean, you're going to just say to your CEO, to your boss, you're going to say, hey, I just want to drive people slower down the funnel so they fall in love with my content. Yeah. Good luck with that one. But I think
what's nice is I think you can play it a little bit both ways, right? So you don't have to convince your boss, hey, I want to slow things down. What you can say is, hey, I think we need to also invest in building up an email list of fans and subscribers. I think we also need to invest in whatever it is, content or of whatever type, right? A blog or a podcast or video series or episodic content of some kind. I think we also need to, build our profile in the industry and be at events. I think all this sort of community stuff to build up that brand. And that investment is the long-term one. And then the landing pages and the conversion rate optimization, that's the short term.
No, I got it. Yeah, absolutely. This is one that I'm curious about what you're going to answer. Okay, let's go. So the other one is, the hardest struggle of growing a business are people related and not about technical skills. True or false? And you have to pick true or false. You cannot tell me 50-50, 70-30 or something like that.
I think it's true.
Yeah,
I think it's true. I think that reasonable people could disagree, but in my opinion, the people challenge is far more overwhelming than the business's technical challenge. I think you could maybe argue that the very first version of whatever you're building, maybe that people are less the challenge there before you launch. But once you're building the business, people are absolutely the hardest part.
Yeah, perfect. The other one, and we have a couple to go. I'm going to go quickly through them. The most successful startup founders like yourself are self-made, highly intelligent people that created something out of nothing, changing the world. Most reach success before they turn 30. True or false?
You've never said anything more incorrect. Your whole life,
this is what people think, right? This is what people think, a lot of them.
That's the most false thing you've ever said.
I basically, being 36, already failed in life like 6 years ago. I haven't done shit. So, yeah. How do you feel about that one?
Well, so what's nice is there are a lot of great stats out there from a number of institutes and educational organizations and venture firms, right, that have studied kind of what are the patterns. And patterns are, in fact, that no, most people who start companies are not self-made. They are, in fact, almost always funded by family wealth. And I don't want to say like their families put money into their businesses. What I mean is they have a place to fall back on. They can go, if things don't work out, after their schooling or in their adult life, they have a family and a home to go back to that is safe for them, and they'll get fed, and they'll be totally fine if they need to, right? So that sort of wealth that is a prerequisite, and in most cases, most founders already come from wealthy families, right? And a lot of that is like, you look at the stats, right? It's a lot of like Ivy League schools and brand name schools. Those places cost an incredible amount of money to go to, right? So they're restricting who can go to these schools by family wealth already. And then in addition to that, most of the founders who are successful, and most founders in general, are between the ages of 40 and 65.
Yes.
Right? I think
I still have some time.
In technology, never mind that, right? The rest of the economy, this is also true. In fact, the largest group of founders of new businesses in the United States are women over the age of 40.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, because that is who tends to start businesses on average. We just don't see it reflected in the media and the TV shows and the movies and the TechCrunch articles that we consume, but that is where new businesses are actually happening. The other thing I don't think anybody knows is that new business creation is at a 50-year low in the United States. So we are in the worst sort of startup dearth that we have been in a generation, two generations.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Well, yeah, obviously you think that you lift a rock and a new startup comes out, right? But and you hear them all the time, but it's really interesting. The other one, and this one didn't come from me, so don't get mad at me. It's crowdsourced. So like most, don't just leave me hanging in here. So like most, you made a lot of shitty decisions when you were the CEO at Moz.
Oh yeah. Absolutely true. Undeniably true. Many shitty decisions. I think, ones I seriously regret. I seriously regret taking our focus off of SEO in 2012, 2013. I think that was a terrible idea to try and expand. We hadn't yet really solved the SEO market problem with our product. And we had, just a tremendous amount more that we should and could be doing. I think I did a bad job building up the engineering strength and discipline inside Moz's organization. I would go back and do that entirely differently. I don't think we put nearly enough focus into UI, UX, and design that we should have, and I would do that again. I would change that up. I also wouldn't have hired nearly as many people. I think I got obsessed with having a big team because then I would look big and important and fancy.
Yeah, let's face it, it was also what the VC wanted for your Series B and so on, right? Like that's also the market pressure to get more people in. It's a sign of growth at the end of the day for the market.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to discount the fact that I was biased by the world that I was living in, right? The ocean that I was swimming in was VC backed, try and raise a bigger round, try and become a unicorn, all that stuff. But but I don't think that's an excuse for not paying attention to what was really going on. And the job of the CEO and founder is don't get biased by, the world around you. And I really did. I also regret, I wrote about this as well on the blog. I regret stepping down as CEO. I don't think that was the right move. So
well, it's all easy in hindsight, right? Like it's this is why I think when most of the content we hear out there, when somebody says, "Yeah, we always knew this was a great idea and we were going to be successful," like in hindsight, you can make anything sound amazing, right? You could have easily taken that road instead of writing a book. You wrote taking like essentially a massive shit all over yourself and just like being really vulnerable, right? You could have easily just said, "Well, I planned it all along." Right, it was always my intention to do it this way, and everybody would have did it, right? Like I think that's
sure. I think those make for such misleading tales. And what's interesting, Nacho, is I'm sure you've had this experience too, right? If you go to whatever coffee shop or bar and you sit down with your friend who's a founder and you get the real story, it is never never what is portrayed, right? It's never crazy. What's in the media. And I never wanted that to happen, right? I wanted people to be able to read Lost and Founder or to look at the story of Moz and be like, oh, shit, that guy actually told it how it is. Well, I can't believe it.
Before we go into the last one, but like marketing events, right, are the pinnacle of this, right? It's a full of people that know how to market themselves and also besides their business, right? So everybody's doing freaking amazing when you're talking about it. And all of a sudden, like 3 of them are bankrupting in 3 weeks. I've never been in a meeting with marketers where I've said like, how you guys doing? No, man, we're struggling. We're doing really badly. Everybody's doing amazing. Everybody's growing fantastically. And this is why your book is so refreshing. And mostly what you've done in the last 20 years is so refreshing. But to wrap it up with the true and false, and I think this relates to what we're speaking about, is that this is the last statement: vulnerability equals weakness. True or false?
False. Yeah. I mean, I think that being vulnerable is culturally ingrained, especially in men, especially in the United States. I don't know what it's like in the Netherlands.
No, absolutely. Latin men. Well, I wasn't grow up here in the Netherlands, but Latin men, of course, never cry. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, right. So I think the Americas, throughout the Americas, right, that there's this culture of whatever manliness and macho-ness and needing to project strength. And in fact, that is weakness. That is what will tear you down. That is what popular culture calls toxic masculinity. But in fact, it's just this infection, this cultural infection that we have that make us think that we're not allowed to show our emotions, that we're not allowed to talk about tough subjects, that we're not allowed to express having a hard time. And what does it do? It just creates intergenerational damage, right? Our parents, whatever, our fathers are shitty to us, and then we think we have to be shitty to our sons, and they're shitty to their sons. And what do you get from it, right? You get the worst of humanity, and we can end that, right? We have the choice. We get to decide whether we are ready to be emotional and vulnerable and make those hard decisions to be, different kinds of men. And that, I think that's a beautiful thing, right? That freedom is ours.
I mean, what blows my mind is that I think you wrote this book 5 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, and I thought it was going to start some sort of a thing, right? I thought when I read it the first time, I thought like, wow, this is going to start something. People will start being a bit more open about these things. And all of a sudden, then nothing happened. Right? Like everything kept being the same thing. We came back to like showing off, and we came back to the usual. Like nobody went on a honesty spree and just started like throwing it all out. Right? Like, and one of the headlines you have in the book that I think really stuck with me is you say, if people have to cry in the bathroom, you're fucking up. Right? and I love that one. I think it's really true. But what's also interesting is that this time we're in right now, this is particularly important, right? Because most people are being faced with like, well, dude, it's tough times. Either you cost some tooling or you let go some people, sort of thing, right? Most of the people are in that. And some managers, I'm very much like you. I'm very much like into the people side of a business. And then you doubt yourself, wondering like, does this make me weak, right? Because there's people that were willing to pull the trigger on somebody like this. They'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll just get rid of these 3 people and then I'm good with my math. And you'll be like, okay, I don't feel like I can do that. Shit, does that make me really weak? You know? And sometimes, I guess, in some situations, it puts you in a hard spot, right? But
I think that element of keeping people, letting people go, having those hard conversations, I think that's one of the toughest places to get to, right? You need a sort of level of emotional maturity and long-term vision on that stuff that is really hard to do. So at Moz, I was terrible about letting people go. Yeah, like I felt awful about it. Anytime I had to do it, it was terrible. It was always like this long, drawn out process. And very frankly, right, I've completely gone 180. Now I've seen tons of people, join the company and then leave the company. And even though they're pissed at you, the day that they're fired, 6 months later, they're almost always better off. They're often making more money at some new job and they're happier there and like they fit in better there. And it's a journey, right? Our professional careers in high tech, information economy stuff, it is a journey, and there's I don't feel that shame anymore letting someone go. But I think that takes a lot to get to, right?
Yeah.
It really,
Yeah.
and
100%.
so, yeah, it's just a question of like I think having that experience a few times and then being ready to say, hey, if it's not working out, sometimes the story that I want to tell isn't the story that they want to read.
Yep.
Right? Isn't the story that they want to be part of. And that's okay. That's not my fault. That's not their fault. Let's forgive each other and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the interesting things in the book, well, I mean, generally in the interviews you do, is that you've been very vocal about the impact that working in startups and tech can have on a person's mental health. And I personally feel, I don't know what's your opinion, being in 20 years in the US doing this and so on, but I personally feel it's been getting a bit worse. Before we had social media mostly in like the hobby part of our life, right? Like, so people would be, hey, I'm doing a barbecue here, I'm doing the other thing. Now social media is also a big part of our work life. And we have people like bragging about their jobs and what they're doing, and then making a lot of people feel like crap about that. I mean, if there's anything that's exponentially growing now, is burnouts and imposter syndrome issues, right? Like, if you want to talk exponential growth, there's one for you. And so one of the things that I wonder is that even after you've had all of this success, and I think this is really interesting for people listening, like, do you still feel like you scroll down your feed and you go like, holy shit, I must be doing something wrong here because all of these people are doing so great? Like, do you still get that feeling, even though you're now a very accomplished dude and yeah, in a different stage of your life? How do you feel about that?
I felt that way. I think, Nacho, if you had asked me that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have said, yeah, absolutely. I feel bad about what I've done and what I've built and why. But today, I don't know how I got here, but no, I think the answer is no, I don't feel that way. I don't feel jealous of, no, let me rephrase that. I would love to have more money, right? I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of people I would love to help. There's a lot of things I would love to be able to do. There's a lot of, there's a lot of causes that deserve a lot of money right now. And I feel bad that I can't do more things more powerfully to help on the financial side. That being said, it is also a huge burden lifted to be someone who's like, my assets are like maybe $400,000. So I can't do that much, right? So I have to focus on what I can do. And having that limitation in some ways is a good thing, right? And I feel the scrappiness and the struggle of like, okay, I got to make SparkToro work, right? Every day I got to get up and like.
There's also a social pressure there, right? Because one of the things, like, you do have an advantage, like when you're launching a product to marketers, right? And you have already a big following, like that's obviously something that's beneficial, and it's not free. Of course, you've earned it over 20 years of crazy blogging, like how many times I cannot even remember, right? But at the same time, that it's very important to know that you also have a disadvantage, which is that people expect greatness from you, right? So when you launch something and you're very well known, you can look at it two ways. You can say, well, I have nothing to lose. I'm already set. I have my salary with Moss, my stock, whatever it is. I'm done. But at the other side, like, people are going to give you so much more shit because you're supposed to always be successful, right? It's your brand. You always kill it when you do something. So it's a big risk. Right. Has that gotten to you a little bit more in the last 3 or 4 months after SparkToro launch?
I think there's definitely high expectations, and I feel like this was one of the better products, maybe the best product I've ever put out. I'm not sure if it's quite. I think that now the challenge with what's interesting about the challenge with SparkToro is I don't have the sense that the product isn't good enough. I have a sense that the education isn't good enough, right? And so that sort of sits on me, right? My job is to educate people about what SparkToro can do, because it's unfortunately or fortunately, it's in a sphere that people can't describe. Like, Nacho, I'm sure you do this work. Your teams do this work.
Oh man,
right?
Absolutely.
The work is, I need to figure out all the sources that my audience pays attention to, right? The podcast they listen to, the video, YouTube channels they watch, the Twitter and social accounts that they follow, the blogs they read, the websites they visit, the publications they pay attention to. I have to figure that stuff out. And then I can go do good kinds of marketing in all those places. But we don't have a name for that.
Yeah, of course.
Like I asked tons of people like you, right?
Yeah.
You're like, hey, Nacho, what do you call that? And most folks would say, I do that work, but I have no name for it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're gonna go back to that one more in depth after. But yeah, I know. But one of the interesting things as well when you mentioned the product, right, is because your products have been highly technical to an extent, right? So about crawling the entire internet and very mad scientist kind of stuff. Right, and the mustache put you in that direction right away when you were doing your whiteboard Fridays and that sort of thing.
True.
And I mean, by the way, like a lot of people perceive you as a super technical marketer, right? Because given the nature of your product. But in your book, you mentioned that you're not really that technical. No. And you mentioned how much of a pain it was to have different CTOs that wouldn't just speak plain English to you, so you could just like get around to doing your job and making decisions, and how much you struggled with not even understanding why you were failing because the product was so highly technical. So my question to you is, if you had a do-over, right? We only have one brain, so you cannot do everything, right? So what percentage of the brain would you allocate to like technical knowledge, and what percentage of the brain would you allocate to like people knowledge? How would you distribute your very limited, the limited mental capacity that we all human have?
Sure. I think I would, if I had it to do over again, I would invest more in the technical side, and I would dodge the people problem, which is what I'm doing with SparkToro, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Give me some numbers though. How much on each side?
I think I'd probably, so right now, if I were to go back to the Moz days, I would say I was 80-20, and I'd probably try and balance that at 40-60.
Okay. Yeah, it's super interesting because I see so many people, especially with, like the whole growth hacking movement and now product-led growth and all these buzz things that come and go. So many people feel like a marketer, like every marketer should code in Python, and that every marketer should be a master in SQL database.
I have some good data about this. So I don't know if you saw, Nacho, but I've been running a survey to help aspiring marketers get into the field.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I asked was, what skills, do you think have been most important to your career? What skills do you look for in new marketers? And the technical skills, coding, was mentioned by less than 5%.
That's super interesting.
It might feel to a lot of people like there's, thought leaders and people on stages saying you need to be technical, you should code, all that kind of stuff. But in fact, the overwhelming majority of marketers say that those skill sets have not been hugely helpful to their careers, and that they don't look for them in other marketers.
Well, yeah, the very wrongly called soft side of marketing, right? Branding and so on, is clearly making a comeback, right? We went bananas when we saw Google and we were like, we can measure everything now. And then we started measuring everything, going crazy. If you cannot measure it, it didn't happen. If I don't see that people was attributed to this ad, then that doesn't happen, and all this kind of madness. And we're kind of coming back to our senses and be like, dude, like this kind of stuff, creativity and like actual branding and all these softer things that, any person could say, like any idiot can do that, but not really, are making a comeback, right? We had like this hard skill inflation for the last 10, 20 years. And now I think we're coming back to our senses and starting to think again that these things are important.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that I think happened over the course of these 10, 15 years where things were immensely measurable. And now we're trending away from measurability, right? Because Google and Facebook are trying to hide all the stats, and they're lobbying for privacy, which is ostensibly just only we're allowed to measure things. Only we can show you the data, right?
A lifelong challenge for you going against Google, right?
I mean, I feel like my lifelong challenge is against monopoly power, right? Yeah. Like I just don't like big companies, whatever, fucking with the system. That really bothers me, right?
No,
and
I get it, man.
I think that removes opportunity for all of us. And
that's cool because also everything that you discovered at some point when you were like geeking out in SEO at the very early days in your 20s, right? You put everything out there.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you uncovered everything to keep it to yourself. You put it all out there. It was all open, right? That was a huge part of your success as well.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's not only, it was helpful to the business, but I think it was also the right thing to do, right? I think that had a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. When I left Moz, right, the day I wrote that blog post, almost 2 years ago now, right? My last day at Moz, my first day at SparkToro.
Yeah.
And I got hundreds of emails. Nacho, like I can't even, my inbox was crazy with just people saying nice things about how I'd helped them in their career. And to be honest, right, that day, the day I left was dark.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like I was, I was just heartbroken and infuriated and frustrated and felt like I had wasted 17 years of my life in this, trying to build this company that never had a financial exit, and was the growth was sort of plateauing and just infuriatingly frustrating. Really,
well, you're still having a growth rate that most like traditional businesses would be really happy with.
Sure, yeah, traditional, but not venture backed. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, sorry. And then the next day, right? The next day when I opened my inbox, like I remember I had tears. Like I had tears coming down my cheeks as I was just reading through my inbox and was like, oh my God, I can't. It took me 4 days of all email to just reply to all the people who had reached out and just been kind, right?
I gotta say, man, like so people know as well, like I wrote you to do this podcast, right? We haven't met before. And I just sent you this email being like, hey, this is what I want to do. You replied like in hours and you were like, cool, I'll do it. That was really cool for me because I've been reading your material for a while and I really respect the way you put yourself out there. But then you do wonder like, okay, let's see if actually like he will actually just reply to me and be like, okay, let's do it, right? Or he will be like, no, this is not a big podcast. And you just went ahead and did it, right? And I think that speaks really loud for what, you put your money where your mouth is sort of situation. I think you're really, kind of like telling people how to do. What's crazy to me, it's that even though you've been putting this out there for ages, I don't see more of it, right? I think this is also my little attempt to get some of that more going with this podcast, right? Like to my little grain of sand there, because it's still the norm to just like bullshit your way into looking amazing. Like that's still the norm. There's still people not open up, and I think a lot of people are fearful of how their careers look. Like I need to look like I'm amazing and I'm gonna get hired if I'm amazing. So if I'm putting myself out there like I make mistakes, I cannot afford it. Rand can afford it because been there, done that. He's in a different stage of life, but I can't. And I don't really think that's true. I think you can at all times say like, I don't have any clue what I'm doing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. There's a frustrating and I think unfortunately growing sort of trend in a bunch of subcultures around projecting success over being transparent and vulnerable. And that is not, I don't think that's healthy, right? I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we should encourage that. Stop clicking likes on your friends' Instagram posts that are doing that shit, right? Like, don't encourage that, right? Encourage and reward vulnerability, right? When people share the real stuff that's going on with them, when they are frank and honest about their failures, I think that's a wonderful thing, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned, one of the other things you mentioned in the book is how businesses inherit their founders' attributes, right? And obviously with those come the founders' flaws, right? And you also mentioned how Moz inherited some of yours. Today, do you think after all the experience you've had, how are you trying to prevent this from happening at SparkToro, right? Because let's be honest, when you look at mistakes in hindsight, as we were saying before, it's like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. But when you're in the role and when you're in the middle of the whole thing, it's not that obvious, right? So
no, it's
not. How are you feeling about that the second time around?
Yeah, I think part of that is an acceptance that your flaws will
unavoidably
will unavoidably be part of what you build, right? And there are ways to help with that, right? You can try and avoid facing the problems that you're bad at, right? So whatever we talked about, the accounting example or my example of like people in politics issues, or you can bolster it with people who join you on the journey, right? So I am not technical. But Casey, my co-founder, is extremely technical, right? And he's a full stack across the board, back end and front. And so Yeah, it's been really wonderful working with him, right? Because he's sort of whatever, you take care of all the marketing stuff, all the branding, all the product stuff, like all the people stuff, all the contractor management, conversion rate optimization, like all that stuff, writing everything. I'll make sure that this product works really well and fast and smoothly. And yeah, I mean, today is our first and only downtime that we've had in the company's history. So that's nice.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the recording, and also like, well, and there's an unavoidable, pain that we have to discuss here. I didn't want to go too deep on it because I think it's not your fault. It's just basically we're all screwed in this situation, and it's a global pandemic, right? So right now, the crisis, it's unthinkable in magnitude. Nobody thought it was going to get that big. And if I remember correctly, I got the email. So let me rewind a little bit. So you launched Moz in 2004. You raised funds right before the 2008 crisis, right? So in 2007. And on the day that you were launching, actually, there was the clash of like Lehman Brothers, if I get this correctly. Then fast forward to March 2020. SparkToro is launching now in the middle of a global pandemic. So I have great timing for this shit, I can tell you.
I know. I need to make sure I don't launch any more companies because I clearly every time I do, it just brings the world down.
It's good. But the first one, if I got this right. So first of all, I got the email in March 10th because I was on the waiting list to use SparkToro. And I got the email, I think, on March 10th. And I haven't been back in the office since March 13th. Right. So this was right after. Right. From what's in the book, you mentioned that you kind of surfed through the 2008 one, right? Yeah, we're in a good spot.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about how you lived the 2008 one, and how is it? Did you learn anything that you can apply into 2020, or was it so good for you that it wasn't even a crisis, and now this is actually your first one as a founder?
So with the 2008 financial crisis, I think that we missed it, or we surfed through it for two big reasons, right? One was we were small enough at the time that the adoption of our product was much, whatever that growth rate was, we didn't know what it was going to look like without the financial crisis, right? So we sort of surfed through it because we were unaware. And also we benefited from the fact that a ton of businesses were still getting online, trying to figure out online advertising and marketing, trying to figure out how to switch their budgets from high cost of acquisition to low cost of acquisition. And SEO was growing like a weed, right? So, that period from probably 2005 until I would say 2018 or so, that was like the massive growth for SEO. And actually, probably those last 5-6 years, even more so than the first 5. So that helped us a lot. With SparkToro and the pandemic, we had some data. So I think you were in the second or third batch of about 8 batches that we sent from the end of February until the beginning of April, right, for the early access group. And then we did the public launch April 22nd. Yeah. And during that time, Nacho, we saw conversion rates go from about 4.5% in the first batch to 0.4% in the last batch, right? And each time, my email was the reply to email on there, right? So you got the email directly from me.
Yeah.
And so the bounces came back to me as well, which meant that every week I was seeing more and more bounces that didn't say so-and-so is out of the office. They said so-and-so is no longer with the company. This email account has been closed, right? And so just hundreds of layoffs that were happening over the course of this. And then people emailing and being like, I really love what you're doing with SparkToro, but I no longer have a corporate credit card. So I have to get approval through finance. We're not allowed to spend anything this year. Like no new tools, right?
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to dial back on our subscription, so I can't invest. Oh shit, right? We really felt this one much more strongly.
Okay, but this is an interesting point you mentioned, because one of the common things that I think every marketer has been experiencing, unless you're in one of those companies that are thriving at this, which is very few, right? Most marketing managers have gotten an email from their CFO or their finance person saying, well, where can we trim some fat? Right? Like, what are you guys using that you don't truly, because marketers are famous for buying a shitload of tools. So you're like, okay, which are the ones that you actually really, really need to do your job, and which ones are the ones you can let go of? And this is the situation where nice to haves, right? Or must haves are, nice to haves are really struggling and must haves are thriving. Like you're not going to change your CRM all of a sudden. You're not going to change these kind of things. You will very easily let go of some other tools. So, how have you faced this challenge this time around? Yeah. Because you were, first of all, I love SparkToro. I've been using it. And cool. And I think it's really cool. I like it. But I'm one of those people that is like, I'm not going to spend a penny more this quarter in anything else. Right?
And SparkToro is a nice to have, right? It's not a I have to have it to run my business.
So that was my question, right? Yeah. How do you see it? And is it your goal that at some point marketers see it as a must have and you think you can get it there, or you're okay with being a nice to have and that's fine?
Yeah, I think I would fall more in the second bucket than the first, right? So I think of SparkToro as, hey, this is some remarkable data that can save you a tremendous amount of time and make you a lot smarter about your marketing strategy and tactical decisions and where to put your budget. But it is not it's not a core operating system for a marketing team or an agency. It is it's a data superpower that can add on to your efforts rather than something that you absolutely need to function. And what's interesting about that is I think those sorts of tools and those sorts of data sources can have a bright future, a long-term future, a profitable future, but they're going to be hit hard when there's economic downturns. And we just have to be okay with that. And we are okay with that, right? We're in this world of, I think as the economy recovers, as people put money back into marketing, SparkToro will be useful for them, right? When they try and figure out where to allocate their budgets. Hey, if they're not using SparkToro, they're going to get their asses kicked by people who are, right? Because this data is not available other places. But yeah.
No, but I think your situation right now, it's you can, in a way, afford those luxuries, right? Like in a way that you can live with that. And that's okay. You also mentioned that one of your pains right now, which is related to the crisis, was pricing. Right. Yeah. And pricing, dude, it's one of those things that everybody thinks that is easy and that everybody can do. And it's so goddamn difficult. And it's something you really need to be a super expert on it to really nail it. If you're not, you're mostly guessing around. Yeah. You can have some data.
How do you know if you're doing it right?
I don't know. I've sat in meetings so many with like different businesses where you just go like, well, nah, that's too cheap. Yeah, that's too cheap. Like, how the hell do you know? Right? Like, we have no fucking clue. It's a conversation of people just sitting together and being like, I would pay that. Yeah. It's so fucking difficult, right? It's so difficult. One of the things that got my attention was that in SparkToro, you have this model that is like a 7-day pass.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really clever, right? Because basically you acknowledge the fact that some people may be like, I want to use the shit out of it for 7 days. I want to screenshot every search that I do, and I just want to get all those things saved for the next 6 months. And then if I need it again, I'll pay again. But in any SaaS business where we all kind of praise the MRR god, right? This would be unthinkable, right? If you go to any business that's strapped for cash or that is in a different situation, and you'll say like, well, why not make it a 7-day pass? Yeah, that's how you get fired. So how did you decide to get to this model? I thought it was really interesting. Well, basically because you can afford it, right? Why not?
A, we can afford it, and B, we talked to a lot of our customers, before we even launched, and a lot of them are agencies and consultants who want to charge their clients directly for the tools that they use, right? So if Airbnb hires Seer Interactive to do some work for them. Gotcha. Seer wants to be like, oh yeah, during this work, we did a bunch of market research and audience intelligence. Here's the data on that. Here's our presentation. This is why we're recommending, these sorts of channels and sources. This is why we want to do these campaigns, blah, 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 blah. And that's $450 that we paid out of pocket for a week of access to SparkToro. We've had 2 agencies already sign up for the 1-week package twice.
Yeah.
Right. In the first 2 months. That's more,
eventually even paying more than the membership would have been.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're just charging their clients for it. Right.
And there's an appreciation as well. There's an appreciation of saying, well, you guys fit what we need and I'll reward you for that. Right.
Exactly.
And I'm actually not strapped for cash. I could pay the membership, but what I want is this. And I'm even willing to pay
I mean, I think the way that one of the agencies, I talked to them directly, right? And what they told me is usually we have someone on our team doing this research work, right? Trying to figure out all these channels and sources. And we spend, right? We have that person do 2 weeks of their job, 40 hours a week is that research to assemble it. So now they can do it in 35 minutes with you. $450 is, that's a no brainer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And in terms of pricing, have you been doing a lot of iteration for that one? Or did you just get started with the one you have and that's it for now?
We got started with the one we have. Casey and I have talked about this. I think, to be honest, if we knew that the pandemic was going to hit as hard as it did and the economy would be as hard hit as it was, we would probably have changed the pricing before launch.
Yeah.
But, right now we're in the process of figuring out whether we should mix it up and change it up for the future. And we'll see.
And in terms of myths, because, I feel like when you talk about pricing, my initial idea, like being, over filled with this whole like tech idea of like people being really smart, it's that you guys would have figured out pricing with some really advanced shit. Right, because you have Casey, right, and you have yourself, and like, wow, two SEO gurus crawling the web and stuff. I would imagine you have this AI-driven, amazing pricing model bot that's telling you how much to price.
The pricing model is this: lick the finger, put it in the wind. All right, that seems right.
Yeah. But I think that's a great learning, man, because I think so many teams are like. For example, one of the people that can probably do this really well is Patrick from Profitwell, which you also did an interview with, like probably one of the few people that can do this in such an academic way, right? And you would imagine, like just by looking at what he puts out, that all of you guys do that, right? Like Moz will do that, SparkToro would do that. Everybody's doing this kind of high advanced pricing, and then the little startups like us kind of like struggle to like match. And we go like, yeah, but we have to look at data. It's like, dude, if these guys even don't have the right data to make these decisions, where are we gonna get that data from? So it's I don't know. I think it's a good concept to ground, because a lot of people might feel like you're doing this super advanced stuff when it comes to your pricing.
Yeah. No, we are not doing super advanced stuff, but yeah, I think over time, right? It's one of those things where you have to learn, and we're using Profitwell, right? So we're trying to see what's going on and learn from that. But yeah.
Okay. And circling back to our last pain of the day, because it's already, time is going quickly. It's building a product in an undefined space. And you touch upon this briefly, and I tried to pull you out because I wanted to bring you back now. So you're in essence a search engine marketer, right? So I can imagine, sort of, right? So I can imagine that before you even went with SparkToro, that was your first instinct. You went and got all the keyword planning, all the kind of things, and kind of figure. That's what I would envision, right? But you still decided to go for it. In the book, you say, for example, that one of the main reasons you succeeded with Moz was that the industry was already kind of spiking, and there was nobody there providing the solutions, right? So you could see the interest increasing, and then here you go, like taking all the secrets off of Google and giving them to the people. Right. In this one, it was very different. So in a way, you're kind of breaking your own rule there. Why did you decide to go the same, regardless of that rule?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, this is a problem I think that marketers have had for, I don't know, a century.
Yeah.
Right. For forever. Marketers always have had to do tremendous amounts of work to figure out what their audiences pay attention to and how they interact and engage offline or online. And the world of market research, which is essentially just surveys, right? Surveys and interviews. We felt that data, that space, had huge opportunities that the web presented, right? Because people's behavior is publicly crawlable, and accessible. We saw some really smart companies doing this, and we thought, okay, we can do that for everyone. We can democratize that data, and that's an exciting company, right? That's an exciting sort of thing to be able to offer. Let's I think very frankly, we just wanted to see whether there was a real market there. And so I did a lot of I did a lot of interviewing. I did some surveys. I talked to a ton of people and found that many, many folks, despite not being able to describe this problem with a word or two, had the problem. And so this is, a lot like the very early days of SEO. I think we're defining the market. We're trying to give it a name, right? Audience intelligence. We're trying to serve that market with the first tool of its kind, or the only tool of its kind. And hey, this is where high risk startups come from. And we're not following the playbook in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think we have the freedom and flexibility to do that, right? SparkToro,
Exactly.
The reason we raised money the way we did, the reason we structured the company the way we did, is because it allows us to be successful whether we are $1 million in MRR or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100, right?
Yeah.
Those are all successful numbers. At Moz, 1, 5, 10, 50, we're all failures.
Yeah.
Right? So...
But I think coming back to something we discussed earlier, like you did have an advantage on this one in terms of your reputation, in terms of your follower base, right? And you're selling still to the same audience, and it's an audience you've captivated for ages. Do you think you would have stayed, like, still taking the leap if that wasn't the case? If you didn't have that kind of like head start?
So I think I might have expanded more broadly the ideas I considered for a startup if I didn't have a big following in one particular space. Like, I wanted to use as leverage the advantages that I had from coming out of Moz, right? Which is, I am reasonably well known in the marketing world. Yeah. I think, the reality is the easiest thing for me to do would have been to build another SEO software type of company.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's build something on analytics. Let's build something in keyword research. Let's build something in on-page optimization, whatever. Right. And I had some ideas in that world, but I distinctly decided that I wanted to try something else, break out of SEO. And so I think this is a good sort of middle ground between those two.
Okay, man. The last few minutes of this podcast, I want to use them to share a few resources, both from your side and mine. So cool. This is my last question. In Lost and Founder, your book, which I highly recommend, I think it's a great book. Do you compare starting a business in the very few first pages, like playing a video game for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And you say clearly that the first time that you're playing a video game, you'll suck. If you're me, you'll probably suck for 10 years because I'm not really good at video games. But in this case, I believe that even though you learn from experiences, and that's really valuable, those mistakes are very evident in retrospect, but they're not evident as you're going. Right. So I think saying something like, I'm not going to make these mistakes again because I've already made them. Yeah. I think there's a certain truth in that, but not fully true. So my question is, do you feel like you finally got to a stage where if SparkToro keeps growing, right? I know you don't want to grow it to, 100 people, but maybe to 50. Yeah. Do you feel like you're completely going to be free of those mistakes, or you might come back again in a few of those?
I'm certain, right? I think that we have pathways we walk because of who we are. And some of that is malleable and some of it is not. And what happens as you get older is you grow to accept yourself, warts and all. And I think that part of the reality is I will be better able to see those mistakes. I'll be able to see them faster. I'll be able to avoid some of them. I'll be able to make hopefully fewer of them. And when I do make them, I'll be able to forgive myself. Yeah. Right. I'll be able to recognize, hey, yeah, this is how I am. Yeah. This is, I always mess this up. Like, I know I messed this up. All right, well, let's just be okay with that. This is not my strength. Let me bolster it. Let me see if I can find some people to help, or let me work around it, or let me just be okay with the mistake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think because you've been so honest and putting all of this out, right? Like, if that happens again, people will give you less shit about it. Because at the same time, you've been so honest, and you'll be like, this is me, man. It's not, what's funny is you think it's people giving you shit, but really it's you. Yeah.
right? Really, it's you giving you shit. That's what really hurts. That's what drags you down, right? Today, right? I mentioned that we put up this blog post last night about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And today, there people in my LinkedIn, people on Facebook, people on Twitter are being really shitty, right? They're being
they can never underestimate them. Never,
right? And people are being shitty, but I'm not. I don't take that to heart at all, right? That criticism bounces right off me because I don't think we did the wrong thing, right? I believe that it was the right thing. The challenge I think that folks have, entrepreneurs especially, is not when other people are giving you a hard time. It's when you're giving yourself a hard time.
100%. Yeah.
Right? That's what breaks you.
And this is just to wrap it up for the resources, but also people could say, well, it might be easier to not give yourself a hard time when you actually make it. Right? How do you, because that's one thing, right? Like when you hear somebody like Bill Gates telling you like, hey, I made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, well, it's when you're sitting where you're sitting, it's not that hard to recognize, right? I know it's a difference in like magnitude, but what would be like your advice for those people that might have to deal with the fact that, you might be, me even, right? Like in my late 30s and I don't really have the dream of like being the next Elon Musk anymore, right? Like what's your advice for those people?
I mean, I don't think that should be your model, right? So let me put it very frankly. The world needs far fewer Bill Gateses and Elon Musks. Like that's not what we want, right? If we want to build societies that are fair and equitable, that give lots of people opportunity, we don't want a few behemoth monopolies, right? We want tons and tons of small and medium businesses and lots of competition. And that's not politics, that's economics and like society goodness, right? And and as a result of that, what falls out from that is we should be idolizing people who build small and medium successful, long-term profitable businesses that they enjoy working at, that serve their customers well, that serve their community well, that serve their employees well.
Amen.
That's what we should idolize. But we don't even know those people's names. Right?
Yeah.
We don't talk about them. We talk about Elon and Bill. We talk about Jeff Bezos, right? We talk about, whatever, Brian from Airbnb or Uber, right? Like, and that we should stop that, right? So that's on us to start.
We also
to
feed that circle.
Different heroes. Absolutely.
Okay, man. Let's get to the resources. Do you have some goodies you want to share with us? Either a book, something to watch, or something that's been on your mind lately?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about, people and people management and the psychology of that, the challenges of that.
Please don't say the same book I have for myself, because otherwise I have nothing else.
Oh no, it's not this one, is it?
Hold on. Oh, it's not that one. Great.
Okay.
Go for it.
So this book that I'm holding up is called No Hard Feelings. It's from Liz Fosslien and Mollie Duffy. And I think it is the best book I have ever read about working with people, working for people, working to manage people, just a gem of a book. And following them on Twitter is also amazing. They're, I think one of them is an illustrator and does great cartoons, and the content is just awesome. I can't recommend it enough. I wish I'd read it years before I started my business.
Perfect. I'll definitely put the link out when we put this out in different places as well.
Yeah.
What else do you have in there? Something else?
The other recommendation that I've got is if folks have not read it, there's a book called Small Giants. And I love that book. I love the philosophy behind it. It's basically what we've been talking about.
As a small person, I think that's going to really resonate with me as a short.
Yeah, right. It's like these small, profitable, successful companies that are kind of quietly amazing in their fields.
That's great.
And that's what I aim to be.
Cool, man. I have a couple of recommendations. One of them is a book as well. It's called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data. It's by Rishad Tobaccowala. I'm sorry, Rishad, if I just butcher your name, but I think that's the way you pronounce it. The Chief Growth Officer or former Chief Growth Officer, I think, at Publicis Group. Super interesting book, especially because it comes from somebody from a larger corporate environment. And to have somebody that telling you to stay human instead of like just look at PDF reports all day, it's super refreshing, super interesting. And the other one for the people struggling with pricing, which includes me and probably will keep including me for ages to come. I think the ebook that Patrick from Price Intelligently at the time and Profit Well put out called The Anatomy of SaaS Pricing Strategy is really, really interesting. It's really in depth, and it can help us go a little bit less like finger in the air when we're trying to figure out pricing. We're still going to end up doing that because that's what we do. But yeah, besides that, I think that's good. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I would have talked to you for hours. I really appreciate you being here. I think it really shows that you really do, as you say. And thank you so much for joining me. It's been great.
Awesome to be here, Nacho. And please let me know how I can ever be helpful.
All right, man. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Growth Pains.